is enough.
I want the world to be the best place for my children.
You are not alone.
We need renegades to be part of this movement, and they're the ones that are going to change the world.
Welcome back to Renegade Radio, the podcast dedicated to the dissenters of the status quo, bringing you the mindset and strategies to build a healthier, happier, and stronger family, the Renegade way.
It's so important to be a renegade.
Welcome back to another episode of What's Up Wednesday on Renegade Radio. Today we have the privilege of interviewing nutritional expert Cyndi O'Meara, who has been an icon in the health and wellness industry in Australia for almost 20 years. Her unique, surprisingly simple, and down-to-earth approach challenges and encourages others to eliminate unhealthy habits, and she has inspired thousands to make smarter choices about the food they choose to put in their body. By educating people on how to read food labels, why diets don't work, and how drugs can affect your total well-being and vitality, Cyndi confronts her audiences with new truths and empowers them to make long-lasting changes with simple and achievable steps on how to create healthier habits. So please sit back and enjoy today's show with Cyndi O'Meara. So, Cyndi, welcome aboard. What's up?
Well, if it's What's Up Wednesday, so I've been swimming this morning. We've got a huge race here in Mooloolaba on the Sunshine Coast. It's the world's Iron Woman and Man. And so I swim every morning, and I tell you what, it was like Bourke Street, Melbourne today on the ocean. Everybody was swimming.
Wow. So are you by chance, are you in this competition by chance, Cyndi?
No, you have to qualify to be in this.
Ironman, pretty heavy duty, yeah? Or Iron
very
Woman.
Heavy duty. Yeah, not me. No, I love to swim. I occasionally like to get on my bike and do a cruisy ride, and then I love to run on occasion. So no, it's not me.
That's all right. Well, you're very blessed to live by the beach, and it's almost a shame if you don't get out and do those things, isn't it? It's like a waste of a beach.
It is a waste of a beach.
Well, Cyndi, listen, I've told our listeners a little bit about you, but I'm sure they would love to hear more. And you know, we've got a lot of listeners in the States and other places around the world. They'll probably notice an Aussie accent coming from you. But can you tell us a little bit about who you are, the person, but then also how you became one of the leaders in the health and wellness, and in particularly nutrition? You know, how did you go from where you were to where you are today?
It's interesting you should ask me that. I've actually was asked by the Naturopathic Association of Australia to come and speak at their summit. And how did you go from consultant to filmmaker? And so I was asked that very question and addressed that this weekend at that summit. But me as a person, I'm a mum. I have 3 children. They're in their 20s, and I brought them up very differently, just as my parents brought me up very differently in the terms of health. And so my dad was a chiropractor. He did chiropractic at Palmer College in 1956 and graduated in 1959. And he went from pharmacy to chiropractic and decided to bring his children up in a very vitalistic manner. And so I am 56 next month, and I've never had an antibiotic, a Panadol, an aspirin, no forms of medication. I've been brought up on a real food diet, cooking from scratch because that's what my mom, that's the way she taught us. So I've done the same for my children. So that's me as a person, and I have a husband, by the way. We've been married 30 years this year.
Congratulations.
Yay. And as far as nutrition went, I went to the University of Colorado in Boulder, and I did pre-med there because I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I didn't want to be a chiropractor, believe it or not. I just felt that everybody I knew was a chiropractor, and I wanted to do something in the health sciences, but not sure. And while I was at the University of Colorado, I had the most amazing lecturer and the most amazing subject, and it was anthropology and cultural anthropology. And it was through that course and meeting a couple of people that were really into nutrition. Like growing up in the 60s and 70s, we just ate real food. We didn't know anything else. So to find somebody who loved nutrition and and then learn about how nutrition was an integral part of our survival through the millenniums, I decided I wanted to be a nutritionist. And so I came back to Australia and did Deakin University, or went to Deakin University, finished my Bachelor of Science majoring in nutrition to become a dietitian. And towards the end of my last year of my Bachelor of Science and going into dietetics, I really started to question what I was being taught. I didn't agree with anything. I didn't agree that margarine was better than butter. I didn't agree with low fat. I didn't agree that saturated fat was a bad thing when that was part of what we ate in order for our brains to function better. So I decided to become a chiropractor.
You're all over the shop.
I was all over the shop. And I finished my Bachelor of Science, then went over and did 2 years of chiropractic. And after 2 years of cutting up cadavers and understanding pathology, histology, embryology, and realizing that cutting up cadavers was not going to help me get people healthy, that's the way I saw it, because all I saw was pathology in these cadavers, I decided that what I had been taught through cultural anthropology, what I'd been taught as a child through vitalism, I felt that was where nutrition needed to go. Now, this was 1984. And so I quit chiropractic 2 years in, and I opened up my first consulting as a nutritionist. I think I was charging $40 an hour at that point. And I started to teach real food, like, let's get off breakfast cereals. Let's put you back to butter. Let's learn how to find a bread that's not made with 50 ingredients. Let's look at the dairy you're eating and that it's not refined, etc. And so, and that's what I did. And so now that was, 32 years ago, and now I have a company that is well known around Australia and becoming well known around the world, because we've been saying the same thing for 32 years. We've not changed in any way. It's all about, let's get back to our evolutionary foods that our evolutionary body knows what to do with in order to have energy, unbelievable health, without aches, pains, and modern-day diseases such as heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and autoimmune diseases and inflammatory diseases that we're now seeing skyrocket around Western society, where we've been consuming this ridiculous packaged food-like substances for a couple of generations now.
Thank you, Cyndi, for sharing that. I mean, and I know you're just kind of skimming the surface of your story. I've poked around on your website and videos, and I would encourage our listeners to do so at changinghabits.com.au. And we'll come back to more about your store and all the resources, I should say, that you have for our listeners as well, Cyndi. I think that's awesome. And I'm sure we share the same frustrations. You just touched on a little bit, Cyndi, about just food-like stuffs, and it just seems to you and I, and probably to hopefully some of our listeners, it seems very obvious, but unfortunately to the masses, it's so ingrained to just go down the middle of the aisles at the shops and just buy packages and cans and wrappers of stuff, and then wonder why they're not doing so well. So I'm sure we'll come full circle back to those topics, but I just wanted to ask you, before we dive into that, is what drives you? Obviously, you've worked really hard since 1984, let's say, to educate the masses and to make a difference in the world, not only just in your town and in your country, but literally now you're going kind of global with your message and your products. What drives you?
It's funny you should say that. I often ask myself that too. What gets me up in the morning to continue to do this? And I think in the beginning it was about having the knowledge to be the best person that I could be, to be as healthy as I could possibly be, because I'm from a family that died young. So my mum is from Iowa, USA. My dad met her, when he went to chiropractic college. So She's from a small town in Iowa called Monticello, and she's the oldest of 11 children. And she was born in 1937, and soon after she was born, chemicals started to be sprayed on the cornfields. My grandfather was a corn farmer, and arsenic and lead was sprayed. And then by 1945, it was DDT, and then DDT was banned in 1955, and a new class of chemicals started to be sprayed. And so if I look at that family now, there's only 3 left in that family, and my mum would have only been in her late 70s, and she was the oldest. And I look at, like, my sister was born, my oldest sister was born in the US, and she was plagued with illness her whole life, and she passed away at the age of 46 after suffering 5 autoimmune diseases from being diagnosed around 24. But she seems to remember that it all started when she was about 13 or 14. And then, you know, I've had breast cancer in my family. These are all my close family. Dysphagia, hemophilia, which is the first generation. We've had, my mum died of mesothelioma. My sister died of autoimmune diseases. I have a cousin with type 1 diabetes.
Wow.
I have an aunt that died from a liver issue and breast. It's just, it's insane, actually, absolutely insane. And so I guess for me, it was like, I'm not going down that track. I'm not going to be someone who has a debilitating disease. I have to do something different. And I thank my sister every single day of my life, because I know that when, if the mother is toxic, she will dump her toxins on her firstborn. We know that. That's a well-known thing. So my sister took the brunt of my mother's toxins that she received as a result of living in the middle of the cornfields.
Right.
And so I have to be thankful to her, but I also went, well, I still may have the epigenetics of what was happening with my mother or my grandmother through that chemical revolution. So it was a wish to be the best that I could be. And then when children came along, how could I be the best mother and bring these children up drug-free without the issues that our children have today? So if we look in Australia alone, 40% of the children that are born today will have a lifelong illness. That's unprecedented. And I think that figure is growing. It's not coming down, it's actually growing. Yeah, so I think that was the beginning. And I remember being a mother in a mother's group, and they would see the way I did things, and they'd say, I had a medical doctor's wife say to me, how do you keep your kids off antibiotics, you know, and why do you feed your children that, and what's that? And you know,
yeah.
And so I became a mentor to my mother's group, and many of them followed suit. They'd have a second or a third child, and they'd bring that second or third child up in a very different manner. And so I realized that education was probably the most important thing to do. And I loved educating. I loved writing. This was before social media. I started writing for our local paper. I was a columnist and the health columnist for 2 years in our local paper. And then I decided, well, I have a book now. Why don't I write a book? And this was long before anybody was writing books. My sister had written a book, so she kind of gave me the idea that, wow,
you can write books?
Write a book. Yeah, you can write a book.
That's cool.
So she wrote a book in 1980. Now, let me think. I think it was about 1981. She actually wrote a book called Immunity, Why Not Keep It? And it was way ahead of its time. It's on my website if anybody would like to get it. And it's about antibiotics and vaccinations and the immune system. But this is back in the early 1980s she wrote that. But I still read it today, and it's still current to this very day.
Wow.
So
well,
I guess that writing the book, being asked to speak, and it's like a high. I don't know how else to say it when I'm up on the stage speaking to people. And now instead of speaking to 3 people and 5 people in a talk, I will speak to 500 people in a talk. And I do. It's one of my greatest loves is to, and I still get nervous, by the way. This is not something that I do easily. So I think it was all about, I love to educate, I love to learn, and I love to pass on my knowledge. And it was totally a love for that I believe is the propulsion, because in my way of thinking is only one person that I can really change, and that's myself. I have no other ability of changing anybody else. None. I can give information and they can act on that information, but I can't make somebody change. And as soon as I realized that was when consulting on a one-to-one basis became almost a feeble effort to give information and educate. And so that's why I went to columnist. Well, first of all, mother's group, then columnist, then writing a book, then of course the internet came and websites. And so I wrote more books and more programs and more protocols. And then, I started podcasting. So I've been doing a weekly podcast for the last 3.5 years, going on to my 4th year this November. And then the idea of doing a documentary, I thought that's one way of really getting to the people that don't read, don't listen to podcasts, but are quite happy to look at the television and watch a movie. So I'm not about changing the world. I never have been. I know that is the most arrogant belief that anybody can do that. But I do know this, that I can change myself, and then by example, I may be able to influence my family and friends. And with their love and support and their changing, if that's what they choose to do, we might be able to get to a community. And from a community, we might be able to touch a country, and hopefully there can be a ripple effect or a tsunami of change that affects the world. But I think people need to just start with themselves. And then, by example, people will start to go, oh, you're really looking good, or what are you doing, or how are you doing that? And then you give them that information, and then it's up to them to act. So I guess that's a long answer to a very short question.
No, very, very well. Thank you, Cyndi. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing a little bit about your family history. I mean, there's sounds like a lot of pain and tragedy. And obviously you mentioned as being a mom, that would be a bit of a worry for you as well. Like, so you would almost have to become, just on a mission to get yourself healthy and for your children to stay healthy. And I hope our listeners are gleaning from that regardless of your family history, because your family history, by all accounts, you probably shouldn't be here. And your kids should have problems, but they don't. You've never been sick. Your kids aren't sick, and etc. So for our listeners, I don't want you to think that, well, it's my it's predetermined. I'm going to be sick. It's lifestyle and changes. Would you agree, Cyndi, that people can, a la epigenetics, without going down a huge explanation there, but they're in control, aren't they?
Most definitely. Once upon a time, the whole gene push went, and, if you had that gene, then the chances of you having this cancer or that heart disease or that Alzheimer's was believed predetermined. But now the whole aspect of epigenetics and generational effects, as well as our microbiome, which is where most of our genetics lay, and we can change the microbiome by just what we eat and the environment that we live in, then that changed it changed everything, especially when we finished coding the human gene and realized that we only had a couple more genes than a worm.
Yeah, whoops.
Whoops, So they knew that there was something out there at play. And so, the microbiome, which is 90% our genetics, we are 10% human genetics and we are 90% microbiome genetics. And now that we've learnt to sequence the gene and sequence the microbiome's gene, we're just beginning to realize the diversity and the functions of the many phyla that are in our microbiome. And so I just know that even though we have toxins in our environment, we're not in the world that our ancestors were in. It's changed, and it's changed, I think, unless humans leave the planet, I think it's changed forever. And so it is about us being the best that we possibly can be, using the tools that we have in order to be the best version of ourselves, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
I love it. Absolutely. Ooh, I'm getting all excited, Cyndi, I know your philosophy and mine and many others are just right on. So I'm just hoping our listeners are just picking up some pearls out there. And you've already touched on this a little bit, Cyndi, but I like to call it a renegade moment, if you will. That time, was there a specific pivot point, and you may have already touched on it, a pivot point in your life when, the light bulbs just went off in an instant and you realized that you had to think and do things differently? Was there like a real specific moment and you're like, yep, I'm done with that, we're doing this?
Wow. Not really. I think it was a collection of information that just allowed me to understand what I needed to do in order to be the best version of myself. But I guess 5 years ago was a very pivotal point for me. And actually, I've had a couple of pivotal points in the last 5 years. And I look back now, and with the research that I've done, I understand why 5 to 10 years ago has become very pivotal in many people's lives. And so I'll talk about my pivotal point and why it happened, and then maybe we can go back and see what happened around the year 2000 that has changed the health of the human population. So mine happened 5 or 6 years ago now. It could have been a little bit longer, but I started to get health issues. So I've always eaten the same food. I've always made food from scratch. Like I said, I've never taken any medications. I've lived a very healthy life. And my husband's a chiropractor, my dad's a chiropractor, my sister was a chiropractor, all my friends are chiropractors, and I started to get low back pain. And it was an aching low back pain that just didn't go away. And even though my husband would say, look, structurally you're doing well, but you've just got some inflammation in there, and I don't know where that inflammation's coming from. So this kept going for about 2 years, and every time I'd go for a walk, I'd have to stretch it out. Then I started to get right hip pain, so much pain that I would get up out of my seat and I'd think, oh my gosh, am I going to need a hip replacement here? What is happening to me? I started to wake up at 3 a.m. with anxiety. I was putting on weight. I'd put on over the preceding 2 years with the back pain and the hip pain. I'd put on nearly, in kilos term, 9 kilos, in pound term about 18 pound, a little bit over, maybe even 19 pound. So I'd but slowly putting on this weight. My skin was dry, my hair was dry. I was aging fast, and I was heading to 50. Now you can call that premenopause, you can call that's what 50 is, but I wasn't putting up with that. There is no way I was putting up with that.
Unacceptable.
Unacceptable, non-negotiable. I got to do something. But knowing I was eating a good diet, knowing I was doing everything right, I couldn't place what I was doing wrong. So what I decided to do was to eliminate just about everything from my diet, but foods of the winter hunter-gatherers. So my cultural anthropology came into play. I knew that the winter was a time to detox for the hunter-gatherer. It was an ebb and flow. In the summer, they would put on weight because they ate more saturated fats and more fruits. And then as those foods disappeared and the meats became lean and all that was available were maybe some green shoots, there may not have been any sweet potatoes or any yams available. There may have been winter fruits available, but no summer fruits. So what I did was I cut down all my calories. I ate lean meats and greens and a few winter citrus fruits. That's all I did. And in 3 weeks, I lost 9 kilos of weight, 18 to 19 pounds. And by the way, I never gained that back again, and that was 5 years ago. All of my aches and pains disappeared. Not a hip pain, not a back pain. Anxiety disappeared. Clarity of mind within 8 to 9 days of doing this was phenomenal. Not waking up at 3 with anxiety. And it was like a miracle. So I knew that something that I was consuming was a problem. So what I did was I started to introduce foods back into my diet. And so I started with fat. So I began to eat more fat, so the fat on the meat I would put on, and I even added butter and just things like that, and I was doing well. And about 2 weeks into reintroducing foods back into the diet, I introduced wheat. And my backache came back, pain came back, my anxiety immediately came back. I put on 700 grams, which is nearly, I guess, 1.5 pound of weight overnight. Overnight. You cannot put that much fat on. It had to be water weight. And I questioned. I went, I eat organic wheat. What's wrong with wheat? Why have I got this problem? And that put me on this trajectory of beginning to understand wheat and what they've done to wheat. And that was what my film was all about, was what's with wheat. I decided that maybe I didn't know this, and I'm a nutritionist. Maybe this needs to get out. And soon after, Wheat Belly came out, and then Grain Brain came out, and then by 2012, there was a new malady called non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So it was as like it had happened to me, and then it was like it was happening to everybody, and everybody was talking about it, and all the books were coming out. It was almost like this collective consciousness of what's wrong with wheat. And you just saw this plethora of information and research. Like the year 2000, there was research being done on migraines and gluten. And so, you know, it just happened. And that really changed for me how I actually had to start viewing what I ate and how I ate, because I had to give up wheat completely. I couldn't consume even a microgram of it without it setting off an ache. And I know when I eat it, if I go out for dinner and I say, look, I don't eat wheat, I don't eat gluten, can you make sure that my food is clean of those? If somebody puts it in there or there's a contaminant in there, my little right finger, the joint, in that finger, the knuckle, will ache the next day.
Just a little friendly reminder.
It's just my little friendly reminder to say, hey, there was something in that food. Clean eat for a while. But some people, that will set off an inflammatory response that may last for 3 months. And that's the issue we're faced with when you see that wheat is in vitamins and minerals, vitamin supplements, I should say, and could be in minerals as an adjunct or a excipient. It's in vaccines as an adjunct, not all, but some. It's in medications. So here you have Hashimoto's disease, and you're taking a medication to help you with Hashimoto's, but it's got a wheat excipient or something, or gluten in it, and yet that's perpetuating the disease. We know that. That's science that's been going on for quite a few years now, knowing that gluten seems to perpetuate an autoimmune disease. And so here you are taking a drug that's just creating more and more problems with it. We know that wheat is in a large percentage of our foods. Vitamin C is made from wheat. Most people don't know that, and it's actually not vitamin C, it's called ascorbic acid, but there's no vitamin C on the market that's in vitamins and minerals. It's always ascorbic acid, and ascorbic acid is not vitamin C.
No, it's not.
No. Sugar is made from wheat, and not when it says sucrose, but if it says glucose, that's made from wheat. If it says maltodextrose, dextrose, all of these are wheat-based sugars. I was watching a documentary the other day, and they were talking about wheat can be used as a lining for a house. Wheat can be used to make doors. And I was talking to somebody about it the other day, and they went, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to ask for a gluten-free room when I go to a hotel.
Wow. Well, Cyndi, thank you for sharing that. Not just about wheat in general, but even your own personal story, because how many people, I think it's public enough that, generally speaking, society's starting to question, or they've heard that wheat is bad. But I don't know how many people deep down that have chronic health issues and pain and inflammation and autoimmune issues, how many of them deep down know that, you know, wheat is at the root of it? And more specifically, even if they're trying to eliminate it, as you just so pointed out, it can be hidden in so many other things. Evidently, walls could be it, but, you know, more importantly, like, you know, medications and even vitamins. So they are trying to get well or stay well, and it's buried. So what resource would you tell people, you know, how could your average person go and discover and learn more? Obviously, they can watch your documentary, which is called What's with Wheat, and your podcast. I'm sure I'm going to have a page, listeners, with all Cyndi's information so you can find out more on all this. But is there anything you'd like to add at the moment, Cyndi, about where can people find out more specifically about, you know, these hidden causes that people, you know, is there a book or website that they can go to that's kind of simple to digest?
Yeah, we after we did the documentary, we realized that this was a really poignant question and that people would want answers to it. And in a documentary, we couldn't list everything that had it in it. So we created a program to help people get off wheat. It's
Awesome.
called the 6 Weeks No Wheat. So it's 6 weeks no wheat, and we list all additives, all preservatives, flavorings, all foods, supplements, everything we list in there that have wheat in it. And a lot of people don't realize that there are thickeners out there and stabilizers that are made from wheat. So we actually put that in the book, in the 6 Weeks No Wheat program. And then we talk about breads and how bread is made. And, you know, like in 6 weeks, they may go off it, feel fantastic, but realize that they can have it on occasion. And then if you do have it on occasion, then what can you eat? And so we talk about breads, the better breads to have. And we go through each step. We go through explaining how they're made, how they can be affecting you. And it's a little bit of an education program over and above the What's with Wheat. And plus the What's with Wheat DVD, if you purchase it, and I'm just not sure about online, but I do know if you purchase the DVD, we have amazing interviews from each of the experts that I interviewed over and above than what's in the movie. And they are absolute experts in their field, and I chose them because they knew some aspect about wheat, whether it was the hybridization, whether it was the glyphosate that's used on wheat, whether it was the refining process, how do you farm? So we had a farmer on it. We had Dr. Vandana Shiva, who is the 7th most influential woman in the world, who talked about how do we go back to collecting seeds and the ecology and abandoning the chemical route that we're going. So I got an history of wheat, everything. I got experts from around the world that knew something about what I had learnt, what they had done to wheat, and they were amazing. And the movie is a story about starting from the 1920s and talking about what's with wheat.
Wow. Going back to the 20s.
Yeah, because it was the 1920s that breakfast cereal started. That was our first.
Right.
Yeah, and it was cornflakes to begin with, but then wheat took over from cornflakes, and, you know, you can get a whole grocery store row of breakfast cereals now, and they're all wheat based. And even if they are cornflakes, they've got wheat in them these days. So it's a minefield, and for people who are in crisis, they almost need to stop immediately if wheat is indicated as an issue. But remembering that non-celiac gluten sensitivity and non-celiac wheat sensitivity, there is no diagnosis for it. The only diagnosis is to eliminate wheat and then see how your symptoms improve. A little bit like me. So I didn't have celiac and I didn't have a wheat allergy. And so you would assume, well, I can eat wheat. But it wasn't until I went off it that the dramatic change that I had. And I actually, the program that I did 5-6 years ago, I've actually got that on my website because Excellent. It is such an amazing it's an amazing program that has absolutely changed people's ideas about what they are capable of eating and how their body works at its absolute best. And so when I did it myself, I went, hang on, if it worked for me, will it work for everybody else? So I wrote the program and I gave it out to my database at the time, which wasn't a huge database, but it was, a sizable database. And I just said to them, guys, this is what I've done, give it a go, see how you go. And to this very day, it is our best seller because it works. It's a really good way of losing weight and aches and pains and anxiety fast. But then if you go back to old ways, expect to feel like you used to feel. But if you learn from the program, which is what it's become an educational tool for you and your body to understand what foods work for you and what don't work for you, and you continue on that path, every year you actually notice, oh my gosh, I don't lose my voice anymore. Oh my gosh, my skin's not dry anymore. Look at my hair. And my eyesight's getting better, and it's quite stunning what actually happens. So since I did it 5 years ago, my eyesight has not decreased at all. I can read. I have no problems reading without glasses, and I'm 56. So it's quite phenomenal.
That's awesome.
All I can say. Yeah,
now,
it is awesome.
Now the program, is this the 6 weeks to no wheat program? Is that the one that you're speaking of that you did that others can get onto on your website? Yes,
the 6 weeks no wheat is not the program that I did 5 years ago. I did and wait for it, it's a mouthful. It's called the 4-phase fat elimination protocol. So this is about ridding your body of toxins, because the toxins will be sitting in your fat cells, and you want to mobilize fat. So first of all, you decrease your inflammation. Usually in the first week, you usually lose around 4 to 5 kilos very quickly if you have inflammation, and most people have it. And then the next 2 weeks, you start to use around 350 grams of fat a day that you have put on, over the years that you've been putting weight on. And you lose that every day. And so at the end of that 3-week period, like for me, it was 9 kilos. It was phenomenal. And I've never put that back on again, by the way, never. Because I learnt what was inflaming me. I got rid of the toxins, so I didn't need the fat anymore. And I did that same protocol again about 2 years after that, because I felt like I hadn't shifted all my toxicity, because I was still getting a few problems happening. And so I did the protocol, and on the 3rd week I was in bed for 5 days. Actually, no, I was in bed for 2 days, but I had severe migraines for 5 days. And that was 2 years ago, actually going on 2.5 years. I haven't had a migraine since that day. Not one. Not a headache, nothing. So
well, I'm sure our listeners we have I would say predominantly wheat-free home, but listening to it, it's like, maybe we need to go to a 0 wheat home,
Look, I think it's easier to be 100% than it is to be 95, because when you're 95, you might go out and have a piece of bread. You might go out the next day and have another piece of bread. You might go out and you're not, it's just like this thing, you're 95%. And when people say that to me, I say, well, it's far easier to be 100%, because then you have no tolerance. You just say, no, I don't eat it. I don't eat bread. I don't eat wheat. I don't eat pasta. I don't eat cakes. I don't eat any of that stuff. And I'm very happy. I travel the world. I've just got back from the Gold Coast. I'm about to fly to New Zealand. Then I fly to Vanuatu. Then I'm down to Melbourne. And then I'm across to Perth. So I'm a traveler because I speak so much. And I have learned to go to a restaurant and say, this is what I eat. Don't contaminate me. And you almost have to say, or I may have to call an ambulance.
Yeah, right. And then they won't mess with you.
Then they don't.
That's bad for business.
Yeah, it's very bad for business, and you soon learn to find these foods no matter where you are in the world. It's I've never had a problem? Actually, I lie. LA Airport. There is a real issue at LA Airport. The food is disgusting. There's no other airport in the world I can't find food. But the old part of LA Airport, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, it's LA, you know. Well, Cyndi, thank you so much for sharing all this. I'm excited to get into some things, even as we get off of this interview. Can I ask you, obviously, with your documentary and everything you've been working on these last few years, is there any project or idea right now that has you really excited, or that's kind of around the bend that you're working on?
Well, since I went to the University of Colorado, I had a dream. And I really feel that this dream may have been the instigator for me to be able to do what I've done. You know, when you have a dream and you hold that dream and you've written it down and you know exactly what you want, you just propelled. I don't know, the universe just keeps delivering up so that you can have that dream. And the dream was I wanted an organic food producing farm. So April 6th, 2 p.m., 2015, I bought my 60 acres.
Sweet.
Yeah. So at the moment, we're fertilizing the land naturally through holistic management. In about 3 weeks, we will be putting in 500 food producing trees. We are creating an education center for farmers, but as well as the home gardener. So we'll do permaculture. So that's what drives me at the moment. I have 3 farmers up there. I have a holistic farmer, and then I have 2 apprentices who work 40 hours a week, and they have to work weekends because we have animals, who work up there in order for my dream to be achieved. And that's my pet project at the moment.
That is exciting. I should. It's too bad Carolina's not here. That's like her thing, you know. She would. Maybe we can come and take a tour one day. that would be fantastic. We will take you up on that. Don't worry that you'll be like, oh, he won't leave now.
Nobody leaves. I can tell you, they come and it's such a stunning piece of land.
Oh, it sounds fantastic. and let me ask you, so what is the ultimate vision? Obviously, you're going to be educating farmers, and is the idea to cultivate the idea that, hey, farmers out there, you can do this and make a living and provide healthier food or real food for our communities? I mean, is that the big vision to start literally, you know, growing real healthy organic food for the communities and for the country for that matter? Like, how big are you thinking with this?
Look, I think I'm an addition to already a movement that's happening. So there's already Alan Savory out there. There's, you know, we have some amazing thinkers, Joel Salatin, Vandana Shiva. So we already have some big thinkers out there that are moving big mountains in order to help farmers make that change. And I want to be part of it. I want to have that additional resource that allows the home farmer with 5 acres to the big scale farmer that in Australia they have 1.5 million acres. And it's so funny. I'm talking to big station owners at the moment who say, well, we are organic. We don't spray anything because all we have is cattle. Their cattle are even organic because there's no ticks or there's no problems out in the outback. So I feel like it is a vision, but I'm just a little part of that vision. I'm just another cog in the wheel that will help the awareness get out there and be, I'm not saying that I'm the driver and I'm the one that's doing it. I'm just another person that has learnt from Joel Salatin and Alan Savory and Vandana Shiva and knew that I wanted to do this back in the 1980s. It was just, I don't know. I think about, when did that come about? And I think it was while I was doing Outward Bound, and I spent 2 months in Colorado in the wilderness, that I thought, I want to be on the land. I don't want to be in an urban environment. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's exciting. I can't wait to see it. Well, Cyndi, we could probably talk for a long time here, but We've come to the point in the show which I like to call the Renegade Wrap Up, and really maybe one of the most valuable portions of the podcast, and just some takeaways for people. So I'm hoping that we have a lot of, let's say, young moms listening, and they're probably wondering, how do I get what tips would you have for a young mother, per se, just to start, getting their kids to eat healthy? I find that's a challenge. My kid won't eat that. My kid won't do this. Do you have some advice and or resources for moms who really want to introduce healthier eating, or maybe eliminating wheat, for example, in their homes?
Well, first of all, while you're pregnant and in the first 6 months of that child's life, you are imprinting their diet for life. You are telling them what is part of their survival. It's called an imprinting. So if you in that first 6 months ate McDonald's and takeaway foods and didn't care, then it's going to be harder to change the diet of your child because you've imprinted that. But if you are someone who has imprinted a beautiful, healthy diet through pregnancy, and this is the husband as well, this is not just the woman, and it's the parents eating around these kids, it's everything. It's our survival mechanism. Then if you have done that right, then it won't be hard to go back to making sure they're eating the right food. So that's why I wrote Changing Habits, Changing Lives. I wrote it because let's start with breakfast. What about the salt that you have? How about the sugar that you've got in there? What about, how are you, what kind of dairy have you got? So each chapter is about doing one thing a week, making it a solid habit, and then moving to the next thing. And some are really easy, like switching white salt to a salt that hasn't been mined of all its beautiful minerals.
Yes.
There's 85 minerals in a good salt. So, and then what happened was, because people would read my book and then they'd go, well, Cyndi, you talk about making this salt with seaweed and salt, and where do we get it? And so we now produce that salt because so many people asked us that question, and we now produce the sugar and we now produce the oils. And so we actually, of all the basics of your pantry, we actually have in our store now. And we call them faucet foods that are organic, sustainable, ethical, and you can trust them because they're in my pantry.
That's
and
right.
I do the research.
We've got to shop in Cindy's pantry. It's awesome. Cyndi, can I ask you this? It doesn't have to be a nutritional answer even, but just it could be health, happiness, prosperity. In those areas, what would be the best advice you've ever received in any of those areas, and how it impacted you, and how it could potentially impact our listeners if they applied that lesson to their lives?
Well, I think I've already said it, and that is you can only change yourself, and then by example, you may be able to influence your family and friends, and with their love and support, we may be able to influence a community and then the world. So I think it is change yourself first, don't try and change anybody else. And if you've got young children around you, they're going to change anyway because you're the one cooking the food. And then depending on if it's a husband or wife who's making the change, they usually will blend into that change. And then the mothers group. And I just think don't try and change the world, change yourself. As individuals, and the more individuals that start to make this change, I believe we will create a tsunami of change that will change the health of our future generations. And so that's probably my big one.
That's beautiful, and it's sage advice. I think it was Mother Teresa was asked at some point, what do we need to do to change the world? And I think she said, just go home and love your family. Like,
yeah.
Just start with yourself, start at home, go home and love your family,
Oh yeah, I like that one, and I think that's really important, is to have a home where you do have a family that is loved and they love to come to your home. So, my kids are in their 20s and we have family night. Yeah. And it usually is every night these days.
Yeah, what are we cooking, Mom? I hear your pantry's the best.
For dinner?
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. Well, Cyndi, you've got some really valuable resources for people. How can they find you and get more of what you have to offer in terms of You've got your website, obviously. You've got a podcast, book, documentary. You've got Cyndi's Pantry. What's the easiest way for them to get a hold of all this?
I think the number one spot to go is changinghabits.com.au. And if you're really interested in learning more about the documentary, it's whatswithwheat.com. And then my podcast is part of the Wellness Couch, and we are called Up for a Chat.
Okay.
And then I'm on social media, of course, and it's usually as Changing Habits in Instagram and Facebook, and I'm also on Facebook in What's with Wheat. So all you have to do is plug in What's with Wheat or Changing Habits, and hopefully you will find me.
I don't think that'll be too hard. So listeners, you can find, I will have links to Cyndi's resources and everything we've chatted about today on its own page at www.therenegadefamily.com. And Cyndi, I just want to say I've truly enjoyed speaking with you today, and I can't wait to come visit your farm. And I want to say, I'm getting off and I'm inspired. Like, how can I take things to the next level in my house? And I hope our listeners are thinking the same. And I hope that they'll go to your website and utilize some, if not all, of your resources. Thanks again. And again, listeners, you can go to therenegadefamily.com, and there will be a dedicated page to today's episode. And Cyndi, thank you so much for sharing and making a difference. Really appreciated having you on the Renegade Family.
Thank you, Todd, and thank you for doing what you're doing.
I love you, Daddy.
We're counting on you.
My mom is a renegade.
Thanks for tuning in to Renegade Radio. If you haven't yet done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes and leave us a rating and review. Also, like us on Facebook at facebook.com/TRFTribe. Please email us your questions for FAQ Friday, and we'll do our best to answer them in a future show. Simply email us at faq@therenegadefamily.com. If you got value from this episode and know someone else that would benefit from it as well, please share it with them.
Changing the world is going to start in your house. This is Dr. Todd, and from my family to yours, we wish you all the best. God bless, and we'll catch you soon.
Renegades, man up!